Alright there, I try to avoid favourites. As a concept, they have a tendency to deny the effects of time. By way of what I will loosely call a conceptual palindrome, difference is the same as it moves through time. Perhaps it's more of a conceptual brain twister. Either way, favourites will attempt to fix you in time rather than allow us to move freely through it. Understanding we're a human in process rather than ever being a finished product. Having said that, some things literally stand the test of time, and up there among my, and it actually pains me to say it, favourite comedians is a man called Mitch Hedberg. He had a way of explaining ideas I can't help but identify with, which I think is what makes good comedy. If you can identify with someone, you can feel the shame. You can feel your shame. If you can identify, you can feel the ugly futility of existence, of human decay. The fact that whatever decoration surrounds your life, that is, your death, there's still the same old hole in your bum every morning when you wake up. Mitch Hedberg died at the end of a needle. It would appear I am somewhat focused on mortality this morning, although, as his friend and comedian Doug Stanhope said in far better words, heroin didn't ruin Hedberg's life. He loved drugs. It just ruined that last bit. Anyway, one of Hedberg's lines struck me, and it's stuck with me ever since, like an antithesis to my upbringing. He said, I bought a $7 pen because I always lose pens and I got sick of not caring. Now forget that it's not funny here, being as it is ripped from context. I say antithesis to my upbringing, as I was brought up on, let's say, 50-cent pens. They got lost, they got broke, I didn't look after them. They meant nothing to me. I didn't care about them. As with all good comedy, this line harbours a deeper truth. For what is it to be sick of not caring? It's being overly engaged in the poor quality of your existence. It admits to the disposable, to the throwaway nature of your life. It says to you every time it happens that you are dying, that you are temporary, that you are waste waiting to happen. On top of the morning realization of that hole in your bum still being there, who wants this all day long? Who wants this reminder alongside all the small details in their life? I mean, we could say that culture is there for just that, to give us something to do between being born and knowing we are going to die. But for clarity, here's a list of shit I didn't care about, cheap shit that surrounded my life. And when I say surrounded, if we take a step back and put ourselves in the audience seat, I mean what was my life. Trainers, pens, school bags, clothes, toys, food, books, sheets, pillow, etc., etc. Everything. We were poor, yeah. And when it comes to trainers, in fact, I had the poorest of them all. And this is relevant, as you'll see later. Because although I say trainers, I mean plimsolls. Even the word is vulgar. Remember them? Those unnatty little foot holders with the elastic tongue, the cheap rubber sole, the cheaply glued moulded toe. Put a pair of them on a 9-year-old, you get a month out of them, at best, before the rain, the dirt, the scuff, the wearing, the job they were intended for, peels, then pulls, then tears them apart. But at £2.99 a pair, no bother, Mum just bought another pair. They were basically disposable shoes. Like everything blessed on the poor, they were not meant to last, they were not meant to be nice, they were not meant to be enjoyed, they were not meant to be stylish, they were meant to get you by. Whether it be pens, books, toys, clothes, food, whatever, everything we had, it just got us by. It separated us from animals, just. Indulging culture, we did not. My dad was quite the craftsman, and after working in a foundry casting bronze, he ended up working as a painter and decorator, moving his skill set over to another area, making beautiful cast iron fences for rich interiors, individually tiling miles of wonderful bathrooms, breaking his back making other people's houses luxurious. Once he was commissioned to make a grand copper hood for a real log fire in a house owned by a Mr. East. That's all I knew about him. That, and that he was in packaged food. The stuff no doubt my family ate to pay for his presumably wonderful food and grand copper hoods. It was big, it was huge, and Dad constructed it in his workshop, a space in our house we also called our living room, standing about 5 foot high and about 8 foot across. My dad bent, folded, hammered, riveted, and polished the thing for days. I watched his sweat run down it, leaving visible lines of his labour along its brilliant, reflective golden surface. And after a while, it was taken from the house, expertly manoeuvred through the front door like a giant maths puzzle. The look of pride on my dad's face competing, as always in such moments, with the look of loss, a look of sadness, with the look of being poor. And then, almost immediately, he picked up the scraps of copper, the offcuts, the waste, and began again, bending, polishing, hammering, riveting, folding, not for days this time, but for hours, and made, would you believe it, a miniature version of Mr. East's copper hood, one that stood just a couple of feet high and about 2.5 feet wide, a scale model of the original, if you will, and he fitted it above our fire in our front room, our gas fire, that is, in our little front room. My mum, she immediately set to work with a wad of Duraglit, polishing in circles, in dull, creamy circles, before removing the polish to reveal a bright and beautiful copper hood of our own. It's still there today, 30 years after my dad's death, outliving not only him, but 6 crappy gas fires, upon which it sits like a crown, like an ironic crown. Oh gosh, this is getting biblical now. In the centre, in the middle, at the front, in what we could call the hem. I mean, I'm no metal worker. I inherited the expression of endlessly competing loss, but not the craftsmanship. Anyway, where the hem is folded over, at the centre in the middle has formed a little crack, a tear in the copper. I did this, not intentionally. It's taken a full 30 years to form, from me resting my feet on it in those cold winters, from 15 years old to, when visiting my mum in the present day, now. Over time, the weight of my legs has caused the metal to bend, and like I say, finally tear. Quite wonderfully, this little tear has also caused a build-up of Duraglit, the polish my mum still uses, its endless dull circles to bring it back to the glory of its birthday, which she does with some love and attention, I must say. It's built up all around it, a little bit of tarnish too. It looks fantastic. I love this little tear. It shows history. It marks time. It screams a lack of disposability. It won't last forever. Nothing does. We know that. But it has outlived many, and it will outlive many more. And I'm sure, should the time come when the house is sold, or my overambitious feet cause a tear to run and make the thing actually useless, I'll take it from the wall, cut it up and make something else with the copper. Some kind of monument, some kind of something I have not yet addressed. Something with some kind of meaning. Sometimes that's all that's required. And finally, after my propensity for deviation has run its course, we get to my point. Time, history, craftsmanship, style, meaning, culture are important. They give an object something magical and irreplaceable. They confer upon an object a sense of wonder, a sense of value, a pleasure, an enjoyment. They absorb elements of time itself. They positively contribute to our short time on this planet, in our bodies, in our lives. These things are what separate a crappy Bic biro from a $7 pen. And when you lose them, when they finally, if ever, perish, you do care. And care is something we need to do more of. It says something of our relationship to ourselves. So the subtext to Hedberg's quip is precisely that. It's not that he will care when he loses his $7 pen. It's that the chances of losing it are reduced because it's $7, because it means more to him, because it's better, because it has style. It's not crappy. It has quality. It's not shit. It has time. It bears the marks of history. It shows an engagement with culture. We should all do away with our metaphorical cheap pens. I own pairs of handmade shoes, not fully bespoke. They were not made exclusively for my feet. That's an extravagance, that's ostentatious, that's an ostentatiousness well beyond my wallet. But they are craftsmanship made, they are quality, they are delicious. They cost just short of 600 quid, a lot of money I know, and yet, and this is my main premise, this is what you need to understand, I will save money because of this. I will end up better off financially because of this investment. Here's the facts. Ask yourself, how much do I spend on shoes? Do you buy a pair every year? Do you spend 70, 50, £100 on a pair of shoes every year? How long do they last? How long before the crappy rubber sole comes off and you can't have them resoled? How long until the crack along the bend before the toes opens up? How long until the heel is worn down and you're arriving at work with wet socks? Even if, and I'm being generous, remember, I grew up on cheap footwear, even if it's every 2 years at say £100, in 10 years, you're going to have spent £500, the same as me on my £500 pair, and yet mine are still going strong. Sure, I've had them resold twice at a cost of 40 quid each time, but I have looked after them. I've cared about them. Why? Because they were expensive. Because they're a $7 pen. Because I've polished them. I have cared for them. Man, I use mink oil on them every quarter. Things I know no one would do ever with a pair of 100 quid shoes. There's no point anyway. The leather isn't good enough quality to even appreciate the polish or the mink oil or the hours of dedicated labour of love required. And my first pair of 500 quid shoes, they're now 14 years old. 14 years. And moreover, they look better with age, and they are formed to fit my feet perfectly. They are like second skins for my feet. They have adapted and stretched and compressed where they should. It's a pleasure to put my feet into them. It's a pleasure to wear them, a pleasure to own them. People always comment on them, always. They look fantastic, and they keep getting better. And there's absolutely no sign they're going to give up the ghost for a long time yet. They do not look brand new, gosh no. Thankfully, far from it. They are like that old copper hood. They are like the little crack and the little build-up of polish. There's shoe polish built up around the eyelets, and there's small cracks across the toes. The tops around the ankles are a slightly different colour to the bottoms near the sole, because that's just a fact of polishing. The tongue has turned rough at the top from literally years of pulling it up to tie the laces. But they have that deep sheen, a kind of luminescence, that incredible depth that you'll find in the portraits of the old masters, a Rembrandt or a Velázquez, that depth that only time and labour can give an object, a spirit, a style, an indulgence, a quality, culture, value, care, all the things that make objects worth having, something the feet of a person who cares about them deserves. They are something wonderful. Now be honest. Can you say anything like that about a pair of 100 quid shoes? No, of course you can't. Quite the opposite, in fact. They are purely functional, utilitarian. They're an insult. And here's the kicker, they are more expensive. If you're £100 a pair of shoes kind of guy, you are paying more for that displeasure. You are paying more for a lack of style. You are paying more for a lack of care, a lack of value. You are paying more to look not so good. You are paying more for the absence of pleasure, the absence of enjoyment, the absence of indulgence, the absence of wonder. Imagine that. These are your feet. They are how you get about. And you are paying more for a hell of a lot less. Clearly, this isn't about shoes, but it's the same with my suits. I do not own a wardrobe of suits. I have 3 now. 3 suits, that's it. 3 suits, a pair of jeans. But my suits were all fully bespoke. They were made for me. The buttonholes were hand sewn. One person made the jackets, one made the waistcoats, one made the trousers, one fixed the lining, etc., etc. They're all specialists in their trade, in their craft. I even went and bought the cloth myself, Holland and Sherry. The finest cloth in the world, still made with love in the UK fabric mills and with a long and wonderful history of their own. I hand-picked the buttons from a specialist button seller. They're horn buttons, not plastic. That'll snap with changes in temperature after a year or two. I picked the lining, I picked the style, I picked the design. I took advice and I was measured, fitted and measured again. The process takes time. Old Chinese, Greek and Jewish tailors along Berwick Street took the garments to their workshops and bent their backs, making them perfect. And, like the shoes, they get better with time. There's been repairs, alterations here and there, all free, all part of the service. And they're amazing. Now, this doesn't come cheap. In fact, take a breath. The first suit I ever had made cost me just short of £2,500. That's about $3,000. But listen, it's now 15 years old. It has lasted 15 years, and like my shoes, it shows no sign of giving up for a good few years more. And yeah, I've looked after my suits. I've hardly ever cleaned them, and when I do, I dry clean them. Quality cloth this good doesn't need that. And they've been worn. Oh man, they've been worn. They've been thrown around on stage in dirty pubs doing stand-up. I've slept in these suits in high-rises, in stairwells, withdrawing from heroin, waiting for my man. I wear my suits daily, and I have done for years, over a decade, and they look amazing. I get stopped in the streets more times than I would like, and I get asked where they're from, who made them, where can I get one. I get stopped in Soho from fashion photographers, and I've turned up in many a style mag. I only went out to get some bread on a fresh autumn London morning. Now ask yourself, that hideous, shiny, black monstrosity you got for £150 for your mate's wedding. Anyone ever done more than take the piss out of it? How's it hanging now? Does it have a handmade floating canvas that has kept its shape? Or is it machine fused? Barely made it out of the factory before it looked like a school blazer picked up in the lost property department. And how many of these suits have you bought in the last 15 years? I mean, if you don't wear suits, fair enough, this won't make any sense to you. But if you do, for work, or for your job, or for weddings, christenings, funerals, or for court, believe me, it's pretty cool wearing a $3,000 suit to a court appearance for a bag of smack. So in 20 years, let's say, how many ugly, unmemorable suits have you had to suffer? Think about it. Do the maths. Again, I am not rich. I do this. I spend £2,500 on a suit 15 years ago to save money, to look incredible, because I like the wonder, I like the magic, I like the history, the craftsmanship, the time. I like the crack in the copper hood. I like the $7 pen. I grew up not caring and I got sick of it. I got sick of not caring. I wear a Rolex. Don't puke just yet. And it's not one of those huge, chunky look at me Rolexes. It's an original vintage watch. It's over 60 years old. It belonged to someone before me and to someone before that, and maybe even someone before that. It's discreet, it's charming. The patina, the word given to the aging, the history, the value, the culture, the wonder that builds up on the face through time, is slightly pink, slightly marbled. You can't fake this. People have tried. Time and use alone gives you such a glow. Again, the glow I see in a Rembrandt, a Vermeer, Velázquez, etc., etc. I see it in that history. The strap has been changed a few times, I'm sure, yet not by me, and I've had it now 13 years. It has survived car crashes, it has survived fights, it has survived being dropped in a pint, it has survived falls in rivers, in lakes, even in baths, it has survived showers. It's a wind-up watch and it still holds perfect time. It's been looked after. And it'll probably outlast me. I paid £1,000 for it and I will never need another watch. I bought it because it's beautiful and again because it will save me money. Sure, a watch is a luxury item. Some say watches are obsolete, but I'm not a teenage girl. I don't have one of those rings on the back of my phone and wear it on my finger. Every time I want to know the time I look at my wrist, I need a watch. It works for me. And while we're here, let's not confuse appearances with superficiality. Remember, we're not social justice fools. We know we live in a competitive world. It defines our society. We're competing for partners, for mating partners, that's fucking to you and me. We're competing for women or for men, for jobs, for contracts, for promotions, for money. Money gives us choices. Choices give us freedom. We are competing for freedom. Your appearance plays a huge part in this. You might watch what you eat, you might go to the gym, but when you wiggle your peacock's tail, it's covered in some drab old bit of polyester. You're damaging your cause, you're losing points, you're losing the competition. Play your hand well, make some effort, move up the pecking order, do well in the competition. Why do you think activists wear blue hair, a plethora of facial piercings, and unreasonably idiotic clothes? It's no accident that this army of twats, this gaggle of losers, appear like this. They want to show they've dipped out the competition, that they're not playing the game. It's a foolish and fatal strategy that actually only goes to bolster the game. It only goes to raise the rest of us. Dropping out of the game of seduction, exiting the dance of charm, gets what is aimed for. Fuck all, nothing, no thing. The exchange of signs and symbols of attraction and appearance runs as deep as our blood itself. It began forming its complex matrix in the chemical swamp. They don't get to drop out, they only get, at best, to choose to fail with partners, to fail with jobs, promotions, contracts, to fail in the realm of appearances. The oil that greases the cogs of further investigation. It's what attracts people to you. Don't be like that. Don't cut off your nose to spite your face. It's stupid and it will brand its negative consequences all over your future. Don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for dirty old t-shirts and junky joggers and your mum's flip-flops, but there's a time and a place not to do that as well. How you appear is 1,000 questions answered without a whisper. From copper fire hoods to watches, from your shoes to a $7 pen, cheap is not cheerful. It harbours a lie. It is more expensive in ways far more important than money too. My glasses, the ones you see in my videos, these are Cutler and Gross. They're handmade over 20 years ago. Now, admittedly, these were a gift. But to replace them, I can't do that. They're not made anymore. They are simply priceless, and I adore them. Nothing else seems to work for me. They've become part of my look. They are part of me. Up close, they bear the marks of not only time, but of the maker. They are not perfect. They are not machine-made. They are wonderful. They give me a sense of pride about myself. Again, I grew up not caring, and that includes about myself. These things, these objects, they are part of me. I care about them. They remind me when I get dressed, when I see myself in reflection or in photographs, when I look at the time, when I put on my shoes, when I slip on my glasses, they remind me I have value, that I am not the nothing I was bred to believe, that I do not need to feel ashamed for who I am, that I am Chris Dangerfield, a person, a life, Chris Dangerfield, deserving of, if nothing else, self-respect.